Hi everyone. Sorry for this had delay, but you are here for our third session on today's Training Industry Learning Leader Talk L&D role in building skills-based organizations, sponsored by Bridge, EOB Learning, GP Strategies, Interplay Learning, and Intrepid by Vital Source. So welcome everyone. I am Liz Spade, the events marketing specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. So we want this session to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to use that chat window to interact with our speaker with any comments and questions. We will also be kind of answering questions throughout, but also have some time for a Q&A at the end. So do not be quiet or shy. Plug those questions in. And at the end of your time with us, you will notice a short survey has popped open in your browser. We would appreciate your thoughts on today's event. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us with the link to the on-demand session. If this is your first training industry event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcasts. So we would love to hear about what you learned from today's session on social media. So please follow us on any platform that you use and share your favorite takeaways with your colleagues. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker for this session. Matt Donovan is the Chief Learning and Initiative Officer at GP Strategies. He is a seasoned expert in learning and development with over 25 years of experience. He has been instrumental in guiding numerous global Fortune 500 companies through transformative initiatives, focusing on leveraging emerging technologies, including AI, to enhance learning experiences and drive organizational growth. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Matt, who is having some camera typical difficulties, but he is going to bring the heat. So very excited for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Absolutely. I'm going to replace and should be able to see the screen coming up here. Let's see. There we go. Everybody should be able to see that. And it's so great. I was just looking at the chat and a lot of the folks out there. So great to see so many familiar faces as well as so many new as well. So excited to be here with you. You guys actually get the benefit of not actually having to look at my ugly mug throughout this. So it'll be back to sharing a whole lot with, just some of those ideas. So this is what I look like if you need a visual, the full beard and everything, but those of you who've seen me before. But I did want to share a little bit more about, that was a great introduction, a little bit more about kind of where I'm coming from. So as I kind of shared my thoughts and insights, you kind of give an idea of like, okay, where's he coming from? What's he been doing? So I am a recovering instructional designer, classically trained. I've been in the industry for several years, and I say that with the most positive intent as possible. And I go back to, having been, classically trained back in the 90s of instructional design and coming forward, I think a lot of what we're doing is evolving the practices, the way we think about that. So it's like continuing to grow and rethink the way we do things around that. So that's an important part. And I'm also want to say, although I'm a AI enthusiast, absolutely, I think it's going to bring a lot of value. I think it is bringing value to the table. I am 100% pro-human. So throughout here, you'll kind of see kind of where, from an approach standpoint, I kind of position thoughts as we're going. So I really would love to see some good comments coming through here. I'm a firm believer that, there is so much brilliance to be shared here from the team as well and the broader population here. Please jump in, add your thoughts, add questions as we're going. I would love to keep this lively as we're jumping into this. So all right. So one of the things I want to first kind of talk about is thinking about this Gen AI adoption journey, because I think one of the things when you're really talking about our look at the new skilling strategies as we're starting to come in and think about them, AI plays a huge role as into either generating, creating, or addressing the skilling gaps that we're seeing out there. So I think the evolution of our approaches to skilling are going to take a lot with following how it is becoming more and more integrated in what we're doing from that. So the quick is like thinking back to when October of 2022, when they first rolled out the OpenAI rolled it out, put a chat interface on the front of a large language model. That's really like a lot of people were able to jump out, sign on, get their individual accounts, and do that. And I call that like the individuals experimenting with ChatGPT. Now, why that's important is because at that singular moment, the individuals actually had access to big data tools and big data more than their organizations would probably have access to. When we think about that true large language model AI basis out there. And so historically, you'd have to bring in like an IBM with Watson and a team of scientists or engineers to kind of come in and help you do that. This is, we're actually getting access to some of that to begin with. So that's the individual. Moves to the internal, which is what we've seen a lot of last year, where organizations are starting to bring in what I would call like a general GBT, like a Copilot or any of the others that you have in there, but they're starting to move it in and apply it toward their data internally, more secure. So you bring it into your secure stack. But it's more of a general application. And I think where we're moving into from here in the future is we're going to get into what we call the integrated, which is integrating AI into reimagined workflows. And so that's what we're going to do. There's some other terms related to this, like if you think of agentic, in the sense that we're going to be using agents, these intelligent agents that kind of walk along the humans in that human plus AI world. They're going to walk along and help us think about how we're changing what we're working on. So it really is, kind of bringing that into, and this is where we're going to see a lot of, I think we start to see the return on investment coming in. We're also going to see like a shift in the way we approach skilling. So it is important to think about how we need to have our skilling strategies need to be agile and need to be able to be progress and evolve over time. And part of it is due to like the disruptions that a lot of our skilling gaps of the future will center around. So that's definitely going to be a key component. All right, jumping ahead, I think this was an interesting one, and this is some Infosys research, which was an interesting component. And this was pulled from World Economic Forum. They had an article in their industry conference they pulled forward, and so draws from this. And one of the things that we're seeing is that organizations are expecting from anywhere from 10 to 40% in terms of productivity gains, and at the same time, only 2% are identifying that they are ready to be able to do that. So we kind of see this duality, this sense of urgency on two sides. Well, on one side and a need on the other, in the sense that we want to be able to, we've seen the hype, we want to be able to see the return on the investment in AI. These are our expectations and how you're going to invest in that. But in reality, there's a lot of ground to be covered for the actual the enterprise AI application. Now, there is some things to think about as we tie back, Gen AI impacts on skilling. Beyond just the gap I talked about here, the next one is really thinking about that a skills shift from a human only to a human plus AI lens. And I'm going to talk about this more before, but as we start to think about skills enabling a workforce, our workforce of the future is going to be that human plus AI. So when we look at, do we have the skills mastered for an work output or work outcome, we're going to tie those skills to that, but we have to think about the humans are enabled as AI as part of that conversation. As the AI adoption evolves, so will the requisite skills. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But the idea is that, while we start with awareness and general applications, so like general prompt engineering, we're going to find that while prompt engineering and understanding what prompt engineering is, the tools will become more sophisticated, especially as you go into an agentic model. The prompt engineering will be baked into it. So you will still need to understand how to engage and prompt with it, but the deep prompt engineering may start to go away as the tools start to pick up some of that as they're going forward. So that's an example of how that nuanced skill set will need to continue to evolve. The next one is the workflow will change. We're going to be looking at the workflow with bringing in AI into what we're doing and how we're doing it, taking a step back and saying, how can I integrate AI into what we used to do as humans only, or with what I would call non-intelligent tools, to now how will we be able to do things faster, better, or things we couldn't even do before. So that workflow and enablement will change. And so part of that faster, better, or new, those are some of the conditions that give us the characteristics around those skills. when it comes to that performance or productivity output component. So again, you're going to see a pattern where I anchor a lot back to talking about skills connecting to the work. And because AI is going to disrupt the workflow, this is why it's paramount that our skilling strategies have to anchor to the work. All right, growing wisdom, and I put a capital W on that, is important because, is why we look at, intelligence plus wisdom equals that AI plus human component with it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that again, but growing wisdom will become one of the bigger challenges that we as L&D professionals, practitioners, working with talent, the talent side and the business side collectively, we're going to have to figure out how do we grow wisdom in new and different ways. And then the last one I said, this is probably a less popular statement. And I'm sure there are people even inside my organization, but as kind of that chief learning and innovation officer, the reality is that there will probably be a productivity dip before you see that significant increase. It's not saying that there isn't going to be a significant ROI on AI, but let's be honest, the one thing as practitioners that we've known forever, anytime a human does something new, I have behavior A to behavior B, there will be a change. That change results in a productivity shift. Anytime I'm learning to do something new. So even if we're still doing things the way we used to, and we're doing things at the same time in new ways, we just got to account for that. And that's a critical change management component that's going through there. And so it really is about that lens of it. I think there's one of those things is that instructional design tying back to human performance improvement. It's really about enabling the humans in that human plus I relationship to really drive productivity, that faster, that better, that new we couldn't do before. So looking at it, so these are just some of the things that are out there. There are also others that'll talk about, Gen AI will also help us get better at pulling what does applied skills look like? What does that work outcome? How do we describe some of those? It will help us tell those stories to feed back into the AI down the road. So there are also ways that it will help us actually tackle some of these challenges too. This one's a fairly straight. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I loved it when Kareem came out and said this as well. It resonates well. AI won't replace humans, but realistically, humans with AI will replace those humans without AI. This is an important thing. So, but what it does is it gives some agency or some power to our workforce in the sense that you have some control over, you're not just competing against this large looming machine. It's like, how do I become the best at being able to actually leverage AI to do things faster, better, or new? Thinking about, taking a step back, rethinking the work, applying it appropriately within that. So this is one. I talked a little bit about intelligence versus wisdom, and I'll give this credit to. I was searching for where I heard this from. Brian O'Driscoll is a rugby player. So if you're a fan of rugby around the world, you might know who he is, but he actually said this, and I'm sure he probably got this wisdom from his grandmother or somebody's aunt somewhere else. So I doubt he's the first person to ever say this. But when we talk about that human plus AI equals the workforce, the question is, for the first time in the invention of work, this is where humans have had to ask, what is my value in work? I mean, before it was like we just use different tools as we're going through, but now as we start to see AI becoming more and more a part of that system, the agents become autonomous in certain layers of this, it becomes that human plus AI equals the workforce, and we have to rethink about what is our role or function in this. So I like to explain that value and describe it this. So AI will be massive in its ability to drive intelligence. It will scale. It'll go beyond human capacity to bring intelligence. And so, but the humans are the one that bring the wisdom to the table. This is the things that the context and a lot of that really comes to be able to put that in place. So for example, knowing that a tomato is a fruit, that is intelligence, and that is one of the key components. Knowing to not put it in a fruit salad. This is what Brian O'Driscoll said. That is wisdom. And that wisdom gets into the contextual application, the differentiation. How does adding a tomato to a fruit salad, because it's fruit, what does it do to the flavor profiles? These are things that AI won't tacitly know. These are the things that humans bring lived experiences, the nuance, the context. Now, humans are constantly sharing their wisdom with AI, and AI gets smarter as we go. But what we know is that AI actually starts to deprecate or get worse over time. The outputs, if humans are not interacting with it. There's a great picture. I don't have it in this deck, but Ethan Malik, who is a great person to follow if you haven't followed him. One useful thing I think is his blog on AI. He's just a really great person. I advocate going out and following him. But he did a thing where he went back in like October, November of 2022, and he asked, an AI-driven tool to create an image of an otter flying in the air. And you see, like, it's kind of this very abstract, not very good. He came through and matched the exact same prompt with, an evolution of tools, and the output was significantly better. And you put them next to each other in 2 years, this thing has gotten a lot better. Now, most people think, oh, well, there's a bunch of scientists that made the tool better. What happened is in those 2 years, all the people that contributed to creating the inputs and training and drawing insights into that tool made that tool better. That's human wisdom makes that tool better, that interaction with it. So that's why I want to keep that to make sure that we all understand that we have a very important role, but that means we kind of need to move up the value chain with where we're going. Some of you, if you've seen me before, I've talked a little bit about this. I wanted to kind of bring this back. It is something that I've been talking about a while, but I think it's important about what is some of that wisdom that we bring in, how do we do it? So when you look at the output of AI, and this starts to get into what's the nature of some of the skills we need to be able to do. The question is evaluating the outputs. So we look at the inputs, we give it some data, we ask it to be able to do some things, and it comes out on the other end, and we have to evaluate. This is that critical thinking. This is the problem solving. Did the output solve the problem or move a solution forward? That's the wisdom we need to be able to bring to the table. So 3 criteria historically that they kind of looked at in the quality of the outputs. The people that built the large language models, it kind of came into these 3. There's actually a 4th category in broad strokes. Is the output of quality? Is the output sensible? Is it specific? Is it interesting? Is it really driving? Is it aligned with the output? So if I'm generating a script for a podcast and asking AI and prompting, is it really relevant? Is it bringing something that's going to make it interesting, or did it just generate something that's kind of, it kind of hits the criteria? So is it safe? Is it free of bias, hate speech, violence? A lot of the constitutional guardrails have been put around, have taken care of a lot of some of this in the tool. But what we don't realize is that even in the data sets we may bring in, there are elements of bias in that we need to be able to identify that it may not be in the tool, it may be in the data sets, and we need to make sure that we're doing that. And the last one is groundedness. Is it supported by an authoritative source? And that authoritative source can be an external source, it could be an internal source. If I wanted AI to generate a response from my RFP, I wanted to authentically align with the proposals I've provided to it, and being able to say that I want to point it only to my proposal responses. I don't want it to go out to the internet and pull other things, because I am comfortable that when I wrote those, it was accurate. So authoritative, to your question in there, is relevant. It is relative to where it's at. So correct, but you want to get to, and I use the word grounded versus true, or the truth. And I want to be clear, is it supported by evidence? And internally, the evidence can be that I created it, I'm confident in the quality of it. It can be internal things that we said, we've had it reviewed by our subject matter experts, which is our position on this. We know it's trusted in that sense. So being able to do that. So here's the example I do, and really quickly is, and I did this as an early exercise, but the idea is, what do I use AI for? This powerful, powerful tool. I said, why not let it help me write a love letter to my wife? And so I went out and I, prompted, really sharpening my skills on prompt engineering. Think of a guy who's been in a relationship for 24 years. I need you to help me write a love letter to my wife. And it generates this. Now, when I sent it to my wife, just to be clear, I did put her name at the top and I put my name at the bottom. So I didn't make that mistake when I put it across. But the question that I'm asking is just real quick, put it in here, put it in the chat window just real quick. Do you think that this meets that criteria when we look at it? Is it sensible? Does it look like a love letter? It says love lettery things, kind of looks like love lettery things I would probably find maybe in a very long Hallmark card, maybe. Great. Is it specific? Now, this is the part that's what's really important. As we start to think about skill sets that are driving this forward, is we need to not only look at what's here, but what's not here. And what's not in this one, and I'm not seeing anything in the chat window, but I'm gonna give you some time to kind of play along, is that if the goal of writing a love letter to my wife is to endear her to me, to deepen our relationship, to bring things to it, this doesn't hit the mark. It doesn't. It's not specific and it's not interesting. It's very generic. And that's the point. This is the wow factor of AI. AI can generate stuff. The question is it interesting? Is it of value? Is it hitting the mark? If I need to engage and connect with another human, I have to bring my wisdom to know my wife, what we're at, to know what engages with her. I need to look at that and know that this isn't going to hit it. So here's the next one I did, of course, for giggles. I went back to it. I said, okay, not very specific. It meets the criteria, but it's very general. So I asked it, can you write it? But now I want you to write it in the tone of film noir. So now that it really kind of comes back and it says, okay, I love what it put out in that sense from a funny and a curiosity. My favorite line here is in the first of the fourth paragraph. Your laughter, like the echo of distant gunshots, reverberates in the chambers of my heart, brings a flicker of hope amidst the despair, a reminder that not all is lost in this cruel, unforgiving world. And it's just like, okay, now did it wake up with more of more interesting? Absolutely. Is it more specific to our relationship? No, it's still missing what's in here about it doesn't talk about where we met or what we did with or our kids or anything like that. And that's the stuff that I would have to bring to it. Now, I could have prompted a ton of stuff. I could have tried to, but most of what resonates between my wife about us and our relationship isn't often documented and it's not easily findable. So my point is that we need to be able to look at this. And I said, I could take this product and I could actually then, with my human addition to it and my wisdom and my knowledge of the relationship, and bring it home to really resonate with her. I could think about how I can make this more engaging, more endearing to her. So again, this is just one of those examples of what are the kind of skill shifts we have? Instead of my skill shift used to be to Matt Donovan write the first draft of a love letter. Now it's like I'm stepping back and saying, what does a love letter mean to my wife and us? And using AI to help draft it. I prompt it, but I'm evaluating the outputs coming out of it. My goal is to solve a problem where maybe I want to be able to send more smaller notes over time to her to strengthen our relationship, keep a focus on us, whatever that may be. I got to bring the problems that I'm trying to solve, and how will I use AI to help me do it? Final note here, of course, her favorite one is the haiku, because as you can imagine, my wife prefers less of me talking. And so that's the one I think she really liked the best out of that. So anyway, and so it is a good question, Raymond, around poor prompting. It is not, and I think that that's a great question. Is it inherent in the tool or nature of poor prompting? I think the point is that AI is getting increasingly better, but it's only by being exposed to additional data and the insights you bring with. So it is a good tool, but it is only as good as the fuel and the interaction that you're putting into it. That's where it has to be. We're continuing to do that. So, all right. So this is kind of tapping into, we've kind of set the stage of why is it different? What's the kind of things, just the tip of the iceberg that we start to look at thinking different about that. And so rethinking our approach to skilling. And this has been something that there was a great article that came out last year. I thought it was nice. It says, skilling is the juice worth the squeeze. And it was a great piece. I think it pulled together some interesting questions, like all this energy and effort that we've been putting around skilling initiatives. Is it really worth it? And I think across the board, between not only, where we, from an experience standpoint, but with our partners and our clients, the answer is we believe skilling is absolutely important, but you got to make sure that you set it up to get the outcomes with what you have. So we need to it is worth the effort, but we need to be able to make it more sustainable and to be able to go to that last mile challenge. So these are some of the pain points that people were talking about in their skilling as they were coming through and saying, here's some areas. So one of the things that we started to see with like failure points around skilling initiatives, that people didn't get alignment. They didn't get alignment across the organization. The skilling initiative starts like in the L&D group, and then they want to land and expand, and then they take it over to talent or to the business. And then the talent business says it doesn't really represent what we need out of a skilling architecture for our needs when we talk about skills and how we use them. So the idea is you got to get alignment across that, the goals, the outputs, how it's going to be used across multiple stakeholders. Buy-in has got to have that business unit, HR, L&D, and the employee. The employee has to be part of this. A skilling architecture, enterprise skilling approach can't just be something we do to the employees or that we just do for them. They have to be, they have to be brought into this, and that'll come up a little more here in a second. Also, whenever they get out and they get the enterprise architecture, they pull it out. Are they getting visibility and are they getting validation in it? So are they getting an accurate and precise view of the current and emerging skilling needs? So all that enterprise architecture we put out, are we able to actually answer that question of like, where is my current workforce? What is the emerging that we need? How far are we from point A to point B, and how do we get there? That's one of those big questions, is to get a good idea of visibility. And I think for all the advancements we have in our organizations, that even if you go out and ask a chief HR officer that really tough question of how many employees do you have and what roles are they in, it is just in a large organization that is very difficult to still answer, much less what is the work that they do, or how do we need to shift into the work we need to be able to do. So this is an area that we need to continue to grow to be able to do that. Validation is, when I say I have a skill, does that really mean I have that skill? We got to make sure that has to be putting that in. So that's important to kind of, I think, where people kind of come in and be able to help make sure that we've got tools that are validating you have the skill sets at a level that we think you do. It's not just what do I think my skill sets are. Agency, this is the last grouping that we have. These are things that we saw that weren't really kind of, that were missing from a lot of the initiatives, which we felt had to be kind of brought into an enterprise skilling, which is agency. This gets back up to that employee. The enterprise skilling architecture has to include the lens of the employee from the employee standpoint. They need, at the end, have to be able to use it, outputs from it, understand it. If they want to talk about mobility, talent mobility tied into the L&D interventions that go into enabling mobility, they need to understand how that architecture structures in a way that's accessible for them. So, and nurture and enable those employees to take that ownership, because when it's a top-down effort, it is just too much to power, especially when you have to continue to get that really, with the disruptions, a continue evolving skilling model. So measurement, agility, measurement is the next one, is making sure that you build in ways. We're talking about why an ontology is important to bring this in, but you have to bring in measurements to not only prove that your architecture is working, it's driving the productivity outputs, it's driving the employee engagement, it's enabling the talent mobility. You got to be able to measure, is it effective? We also need to know where to improve. So it's to prove it's working as well as to improve it. Because the assumption that you're going to nail the enterprise skilling architecture right outside the first launch is foolish to do. And this is one thing where a lot of organizations may measure some of the outputs, but they're not measuring the quality of the architecture itself as a process, as an ongoing agile development through that kind of progressive prototyping and enablement that's out there. The last one is agility, sustainably evolve and adapt, because the thing we know, whether you believe in VUCA or you believe in BANI, which is kind of the new, what we're seeing is the new evolution of VUCA. The idea is that it is a highly disrupted world, and the workforce is experiencing a lot of change, and we need new skills at them continuously. Build it once, shelf life of 5 years just doesn't work anymore. Last one is making sure the end reason of why we're all doing this is that we want to make sure that the skills translate to performance in the role. Learning for learning's sake, or that static state of learning is not beneficial. We want to translate that into performance and productivity. That's the end that we need to be able to drive that through. So I think that that's an important part that we look at as we start to look at that. Real quick on our perspective. So the question is, as we start to do this for ourselves internally, GP Strategies has a very large population of internal designers, developers, consultants, media developers, process manager owners, whether it's help desk or others. We have a lot. So the thing is, how do we approach our skilling is also working with our customers, and the idea that what we build, and I'm looking at the criteria line, we need something that has to be scalable, that has to be agile. It's got to be aligned to the work that we do for ourselves and for each of the different customers we work with. But most importantly, it has to be sustainable. That last one is probably one of the toughest to be able to do. If doing your enterprise skilling work is something that is so heavy, you won't want to continuously do it. It has to get down to a sustainable level of doing it. So Getting back to this, you need to be able to tell a connected story. This goes back to that alignment component. So it can't just start with L&D and they do it, or it can't start in HR, or it can't start in the business and just expect everybody else to do this. So, where you see the center of this thing called the talent life cycle, think of like my enterprise skilling architecture is a flywheel that sits over the top of this center that connects in the business, the HR, the talent with the L&D, and the architecture is this flywheel that makes them all connect and come together. So, for example, if you think about talent acquisition, we know we want the right candidates coming in. We want to know what their gaps are, fill those gaps, get them engaged in the organization, moving along that path, pathway to productivity as quick as possible. So we started to list out, what do we want for these stakeholders? So this is why I talk about that connected story around that talent acquisition. We want to make sure that they're acquiring talent with current emerging skills. We want to recruit the talent cost effectively. The candidate, I want to be excited and confident about the opportunity. Now, L&D, I want to know where are some of the ways as we're starting to build initiatives to fit those, where are their gaps mapping in. We start to look here now like onboarding. So this is the pre or first day, first week, first month, first 90 days. As you look at it, what do they need to get out of that? And what skilling does is gives you a way to be able to achieve that consistently across each of these areas. So the enterprise, you want to be able to achieve maximum productivity with minimal time to mastery. A good, solid work output anchored skilling architecture helps you do that. HR, I want to make sure that I promote a smooth and positive transition. I want them engaged. I want them happy. It's from cradle to grave, from entry to exit. I want to have the best experience possible. L&D, you want a learning experience that engages, enables, closes skill gaps. And the last one is around the employee. I want to be engaged. I want to be productive. I want to feel like I have a home. I'm in France today, so we were discussing a lot over the past couple of days at a great workshop we were just doing, the concept of building a maison, a home and a house where I feel enabled and able to help my organization. I bring value that we can respond to all the disruptions we're seeing. So kind of going through here, my point is I'm not going to go through in all of these in detail, but the idea is that when you're building your skilling architecture, you have to take all the lenses. It can't just be what does the L&D team need out of skilling architecture. It has to be able to feed and nurture and grow the overall intent as we kind of go through here. This will be in the deck. You'll be able to take a look at this specifically as we go through. But the idea is really being able to anchor back into this and really getting back into workforce planning. At the end, that's really the name of the game. How can we help the organization be better at workforce planning? The organization that can better move its workforce in light of competitive disruptions, environmental disruptions, strategic shifts, the company that can move its workforce will be competitively advantaged. That is the new value that we're going to see. We know that there's going to be agility, moving the humans with the AI tools as quickly, that human plus AI, that's the name of the game. And we need a skilling architecture that provides us that agility with it. So kind of coming along with that. So a little bit more about our approach, just real quick. And I'm telling you that I could walk into any room of HR professionals or instructional designers, and I could ask this question, what is a competency? What is a skill? And everybody could kind of come back to this and say, I have a different answer for what it is. I only put this in here for our hours because we really looking at anchoring around the skill. It gets back to tech. It includes techniques and tools, but it's a learned ability to perform a task. This is ours. I'm not saying everybody has to adopt this, but this is what we do so that when we look inside our organization, we all anchor, because imagine we have a lot of instructional designers, we have a lot of talent folks, and just as there's external disagreement, we need to get our internal alignment on that as well. Repetition, ongoing development is something that is assessed and can be measured as you're moving forward. So we've worked into that skilling architecture, ties to the work, can be measured. That brings it into it. So another reason, why has this been throughout the years? Why has there been such a disconnect? And the reason is, and I created this actual visual out of an opportunity that I had. I was invited in by two groups inside a very Fortune 150 organization, and I was invited in by the HR team to say, hey, and this is a little bit back. It was just pre-pandemic, but the conversation was, we need you to come in and talk about the importance of competency models. We've invested in this, and we need you to go tell the L&D folks that they have everything they need to go build. And then the L&D people are saying, hey, HR bought a competency model. We need you to come in and tell them that competency model isn't really helpful when you go to designing training. The reason is that each of these things has a specific intent and use and having different expectations. So I put them on a continuum to say it's an and conversation. Competency models give you X, Y, and Z. And some of these things may fold up under a competency model, but it's the full range of this that we need to do it. A skills taxonomy gives you more of that generalized, static, rigid, hierarchical structure around it. It looks a lot like this org chart here or other examples of that. Interestingly enough, I was showing this to Nigel Payne, and he said, ironically, that looks like how we used to think work got done in organizations. Whereas when we move on to the ontology, we find that work gets done that probably looks something a lot more like the thing on the right, which is an ontology. And the ontology allows us to go into that semi-structured data set, the things that are messy, that break taxonomies, the things that are the one-offs or the nuances. And that's where we need to be able to do. We can't just bring up a very generalized taxonomy and expect that people will actually be able to do work. There's a last mile challenge. Ontologies, that ontology layer is what allows us to kind of layer that over. We look at the work outputs. What is the secret sauce for that success? So that not only do I teach somebody what the 7 elements of a brand plan are, but I can actually start to say these are elements of a winning brand plan in the context of our organization in our competitive environment, so that when you come out of our brand manager academy, you are highly likely to be able to succeed because we've taken you closer to that work output, work product to be able to do. So that's able to do. And it's a great question, Monica. I think we're going to scratch the surface on that, but that is a great question as to what it is. So the idea is you got to kind of keep all of these things in the loop. Shifting to a skills ontology, why is it important? It gives us that data to be able to pull that through. It gives us the agility to anchoring to work. It provides insight into the near future, and it also shows relationships between things. So what you get in this is like relationships between the nodes. So it's not just the node, it's the relationships between them. So for example, Matt Donovan may identify myself as a level 5 out of 5 Excel user. I'm not, but for this exercise, let's say I am. And because I probably am using advanced analytic features in Excel, I probably have a base level understanding of data analytics. And if I'm a brand manager generating brand plans and I use Excel tools to be able to do that, and I'm bringing in data from the field, I can start to triangulate in data points that says, hey, if you're a brand manager, you may also, if you're using these tool sets, you may have these other skills. Now, at what level you need to kind of validate as you're going, but you start to see skill clustering and skill relationships in new and different ways. That's what the semi-structured approach allows you to separate out the very important differentiation between a clinical trial project manager and an engineering project manager in the in the pharmaceutical industry, for example. And what are those, and what is the, for us specifically, and it may actually say, what is it in North America versus what is it in Southeast Asia, for example. They may be very different. So that allows us to get into that. I think many of you have seen a lot of these, that we know that skills are going to need to change based off of AI as we're going through on that. So when we look at this, some of the features of the enterprise skilling that we have, there's 2 ways to think about this. So as we start to roll out our skilling architectures, we need to make sure that we're looking at the levels. So especially when you're bringing AI into the picture, we need to think about what is an executive, what is a leader and manager, what is an employee you need to know. For example, as an executive of the company who is running a human plus AI workforce now, what does it mean to be an executive leading that? What does it mean to be a leader of a team that is human plus AI? And then the employees, what do they need to know? This is also another example. They talk about an AI skills pyramid. We need to start to build that baseline for all the strong base at that one is yes, and Bonnie Beresford is definitely always on the back of my mind with some great insights. But this one actually came from that same article I talked about that was at the conference at the World Economic Forum, very recently, by the way. But you're looking at the strong base of AI aware is a foundation. Now, I added in AI aware will mean you need to basically understand what is AI into what I think agent enabled humans. We're using them in the workflows. We have them. You're going to need a smaller population that are building these co-pilots or these agents. And then you're going to have the AI masters that are solving those truly wicked problems in the organization, trying to bring in the right mix of that forward thinking problem solving with the advanced tools to be able to do that. So as you kind of look at your AI skills, for example, you need to start look at clustering your skills in a direction like this. So here's just an example of why I'm talking about when we dive into this, why it's so important to anchor back to that work details and examples. And as we look at it, so this is a non-AI example, but it ties back into it. During the pandemic, there was a shortage of nurses. I think we're all pretty aware of that. There was an increased demand. The problem is it takes 4 years to create a nurse. That's one of the challenges that we have. So we can't just automatically make more nurses. But what we can do, the question is we can start to rethink the work. Are nurses really needed for all the tasks under their role? Things like checking on stable patients, taking temperatures, taking blood pressure, all of these things, and Robin Jasuthan actually lays this out well in his book, but it's really saying that these are three things that nurses don't have to do. You don't have to have a 4-year nursing degree to do these things. Are there other people in the organization that may have skill sets that can pick up that workload? If I can't change the number of people I have, can I reconfigure the work in ways? And this is important because when we think about AI coming in, are the things in our normal workflows that humans used to do that AI will take over? Where do humans move and what do they do? The skilling strategy has to evolve, aligning with the work, not the job description. And that's one of the important things is that a lot of taxonomies, and I'm not saying taxonomies are bad, but they are not the final answer. And taxonomies are often built off of scanning all of the actual job descriptions that are out there, but the job descriptions may update a lot slower than the actual nature of the very work we want to do. So when we look at candidates to bring in upskilling opportunities, knowing what the work is absolutely important. Another one's a contact center. So let's take a look at a contact center. You have high turnover rates in a position. It's one that does it. Emotional intelligence, when we bring in, while we want to train for that, is often hard to build quickly, especially with sometimes the high turnover rates. It's hard to kind of get it in there. But you also still need to be able to cultivate EI from them because you want among other skills for their career progression, because we need some of them to ultimately become managers and leaders of these groups. So as we go through, how do we change that skilling approach? So reworking, how we think about that. So now imagining I come in and I'm on the call and I'm a contact center agent and I have my EI bot or my agent that walks along and we're on the call together and I pulled it up on my screen and I'm watching. And part of that is it's telling me recognize, acknowledge their pain, apologize, say that I'm sorry to hear that you're having a difficult time. It's sensing the discussion. So you have an EI coach that's helping you connect with the customer to do that. If I measure the skill of the human alone, the human probably doesn't have the EI naturally to do that. And to build them to that sophisticated point will take a lot of time. But I can immediately bring in somebody with a lower EI if I retrain them in a different skill to be able to say, can you function and work with an AI? This is an example of that agent-enabled work level. And so that person, when you have human plus AI, I've hit the skill productivity or performance target with that. So what's going to be interesting here is how do we start to measure skill proficiency? Is it with or without a tool? If the output is I need you to be able to engage a customer, being able to do it by myself and to be able to do it with an agent are probably two different levels when you're measuring just the human as we go through. So this is an example of how we look at starting to bring in and work at different things that we do. This is a part we've got to get really good at. And this is from an L&D standpoint, this means that we have to start reaching across the table. It can't just be that I'm just going to build the training. You have to work with HR and you have to work with the business to be able to rethink the total workflow. I picked this one here, like an organization goal is they want consistent, high quality performance conversations. But what I've done is I've mapped out like 9 steps in a performance conversation. And the thing about it is each one of these 9 is a potential failure point. That things we don't do. If I don't remember it, I'm not likely to do it. If I don't schedule it, not likely to do it. If I don't get feedback collected, it'll be a less than experience. If I don't have the documentation or I scramble to do it, I may not get it documented. I don't have time to prep or refresh. So going on through the coaching, the mentoring, all of those things are setting up for 7, which is really the human to human interaction, which we want to build and enable them to do is to have great conversations. Imagine if I could bring in AI, and I could argue that AI now could take easily 8 of these 9 and take over a significant portion, if not automate all of that. It can help me remember, schedule. It can come to me and say, hey, Tom's actually been working with these 9 people. Would you like to send me, you have these 5 questions. Pick the questions you want me to send, who the people you want me to send it to. I send it, it goes out, it collects it, summarizes it, shares it with me. I review it. I ask it to share with Tom. Tom's got it. I've got it. We come together. It also says, hey, you've got an influencer on Great Conversations. Let me send you a link to that. So it's able to kind of pull a resource related to this. It also says that we've seen some emerging people that are in your area that have been doing these really well. Would you like to have a micro mentoring conversation or a micro coaching opportunity? So what I'm saying is that AI now can be integrated into the system to drive increased performance and productivity instead of just saying it's focused on that one component with it. So we're going to be building some things out there. I know you're popping on screen, so I'm getting there to the end. Thank you. We're all good with that. But the key considerations, and like I said, a lot of this will be in the deck around that. But you're correct in the sense that Microsoft Viva is doing some of this, but I think it still gets back to the organization, us as consultants and practitioners, to bring it home and do that. And so just want to make sure that take the opportunity, connect and follow me on LinkedIn. Would love to hear for you. Keep the conversation going. I hope that I've provoked some thoughts and ideas out there. And so even though I didn't get to see you guys as much, thanks for the opportunity of being here. So.
Of course. No, this was a great conversation, chat. I'll leave your screen up just so everybody can get your email. But thank you so much, Matt. This was a lovely discussion. I appreciate it so much. So with that, I'm still going to keep it on the screen, but we will be taking about a 14 minute break. So up next, we do have Donovan, another Donovan from
Oh,
Interplay.
that's right. I forgot to say that. Yeah, not related to me. I was going to make a joke. I hope he has a good sense of humor. But yeah, I was like, the brother our mother less loved. But no, Doug is not related to me.
Yes, you did it. So excited. But yeah, so his session's coming up on training for impact, connecting employee upskilling and reskilling to business outcomes. So yes, in a moment, I will end this session and you can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to session tabs. I hope you stick around for our next session, which will begin at the top of the hour. Bye, everybody.